In northern Iraq, near the city of Mosul, lies a low, crumbling mound of earth, often overlooked by passers-by. It appears to be nothing more than rubble and dirt, the forgotten remnants of a hill. Yet, 2,500 years ago, standing on that very spot, you would have gazed upon the largest, most powerful, and most magnificent city on Earth. Through advanced AI reconstruction, we've meticulously analyzed ancient stone engravings, cuneiform inscriptions, and centuries of archaeological research to resurrect Nineveh, presenting it as authentically as historical records permit. What you are about to witness is not mere speculation. It is the most accurate depiction history can offer of a city that, by all accounts, should not have been possible. Nineveh served as the formidable capital of the Assyrian Empire, an empire that, at its zenith, extended from the Persian Gulf in the south to the borders of Egypt in the west, a realm that the entire ancient world either dreaded or detested. At its peak, Nineveh boasted a population of approximately 100,000 people, making it, by a significant margin, the largest city in the world. It surpassed Babylon, Memphis, and any urban center that had existed before it. Then, in 612 BCE, within a mere few weeks, it vanished, burned, buried, and so thoroughly erased from the earth that just 2 centuries later, a Greek soldier named Xenophon led his army directly past its ruins, utterly unaware he was traversing the remnants of history's greatest city. He didn't even know its name. This is the tale of how a city emerged from obscurity to dominate the world, and how a world that had endured its tyranny for centuries united to ensure it would never rise again. Prepare yourself, because the story of Nineveh is unlike anything you have ever heard. To truly grasp Nineveh's significance, we must first understand the world into which it was born. Our journey begins in Mesopotamia, a Greek term translating simply to the land between the rivers, the Tigris to the east and the Euphrates to the west. Within this fertile strip of land, something extraordinary began to unfold approximately 6,000 years ago. People started constructing not just villages or camps, but true cities, complete with streets, temples, markets, governments, and writing systems. This is where civilization, as we recognize it today, first took root. Nineveh stands as one of the most ancient among these pioneering cities. The site, situated on the eastern bank of the Tigris, has been continuously inhabited since around 6000 BCE. To provide perspective, people have lived here for an astonishing 8,000 years. The city was ancient, even in ancient times. From its inception, Nineveh was not primarily a military stronghold, but a sacred center. It was dedicated to Ishtar, the goddess of love, war, and fertility, and her magnificent temple here, the Mashmash, became one of the most vital religious sites in the ancient world. Pilgrims journeyed from hundreds of kilometers away, merchants rested their caravans, and traders exchanged goods. Slowly, over centuries, Nineveh blossomed into a substantial settlement. By 3000 BCE, it was already a significant urban center. The Akkadian Empire, under Sargon of Akkad, captured the city around 2334 BCE. Sargon is often credited as history's first empire builder, and Nineveh was one of his prized conquests. His son, Manishtushu, rebuilt the Ishtar temple. Over the subsequent centuries, the city changed hands repeatedly. Akkadians, Babylonians, Hittites, Hurrians, each leaving their indelible mark, each building upon the ruins of those who came before. In Mesopotamia, the practice wasn't to demolish old cities, but to build directly on top of them. This is precisely why, over 3,000 years, Nineveh literally rose from the ground, forming an artificial hill composed of the compressed remains of every civilization that occupied the site. Archaeologists refer to these hills as tells. Nineveh's principal tell, Kuyenjik, towers 20 meters above the surrounding plain. Beneath those 20 meters, the very first settlements still lie buried. By the time the Assyrians solidified their control over Nineveh in the early 2nd millennium BCE, the city already possessed a long and intricate past. Yet, what was to come next belonged to an entirely different category of ambition and power. The Assyrians did not begin as conquerors. For much of the 2nd millennium BCE, they were a relatively modest people in northern Mesopotamia, frequently caught between larger powers, Babylon to the south, the Hittites to the west, and the Hurrians to the north. Yet they learned. Each time they were dominated, each time they were repelled, they meticulously studied what had defeated them. Over centuries, they forged something the ancient world had never truly witnessed before: a professional, standing army. Most armies of antiquity were essentially farmers armed for a campaign season, then sent home to tend their fields. The Assyrian army was fundamentally different. It fought year-round, comprising specialized units such as heavy infantry, cavalry, chariot squadrons, engineers, and siege experts. It boasted a corps of specialists whose sole purpose was to devise methods for breaching walls, an investment other armies had not seriously considered. Their iron weapons also provided a crucial advantage. Iron, being harder than bronze, gave Assyria superior weapons technology by the 9th century BCE, and they knew precisely how to wield it. Under King Ashur-nasirpal II, who reigned from 883 to 859 BCE, the empire embarked on its aggressive expansion. He was a brutal man by any historical standard, and he embraced this reputation, using it as a deliberate instrument of terror. His own inscriptions recount impaling prisoners on stakes outside conquered cities, skinning enemies alive, and constructing towers of severed heads. He made no attempt to conceal these atrocities. He publicized them, ensuring every potential adversary read of his methods before his arrival. It proved effective. City after city in the Levant, modern-day Syria, Lebanon, and parts of Israel surrendered without a fight rather than face the Assyrian army. Ashur-nasirpal received tribute from rulers who never even met him in battle. His successors extended the empire's reach further. Shalmaneser III pushed Assyrian influence westward and southward. Tiglath-Pileser III, ruling from 745 BCE, reformed the empire's administration and introduced a particularly calculated strategy: the mass deportation of conquered populations. Entire communities were uprooted and relocated thousands of kilometers from their homes, deliberately mixed with populations from other deportations, thereby preventing any coherent regional identity and, consequently, any organized resistance from surviving. Sargon II captured the city of Samaria in 722 BCE, completing the conquest of the northern Israelite kingdom and deporting tens of thousands of its people to Assyria and Media. The Hebrew Bible sorrowfully records this as the disappearance of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. The Assyrian strategy was not merely military, it was psychological, demographic, and administrative. They weren't just winning battles, they were dismantling the very possibility of future resistance at its root, scattering the social structures that enabled communities to organize against them. All of this demanded a center, a capital, a city powerful enough to project the empire's authority across a vast and volatile territory. Under Sargon II, that capital was a new city he built himself, Dur-Sharrukin, in what is now northern Iraq. He never quite completed it, for in 705 BCE, Sargon was killed in battle during a campaign. His body never recovered. This event changed everything. Sennacherib inherited the most powerful empire on earth at what should have been its moment of triumph. Yet, the circumstances of his father's death cast a long shadow. In Assyrian belief, a king whose body could not be recovered could not be properly buried, nor could he complete the journey to the afterlife with dignity. Sargon's death was interpreted as a sign of divine disapproval, possibly regarding the location of his new capital, the city he had spent a decade constructing. Sennacherib abandoned Dur-Sharrukin almost immediately. He relocated everything movable to Nineveh, 20 kilometers to the south, a city already ancient, already sacred, already established, a city with history on its side. Then he began his monumental work. What Sennacherib achieved in Nineveh over the subsequent 2 decades was, even by modern standards, breathtaking in its scale and ambition. He constructed walls, not merely ordinary walls, but immense fortifications, 12 kilometers long, nearly 25 meters thick in places, punctuated by 15 grand gates, each named for an Assyrian deity. He rerouted rivers and engineered an elaborate aqueduct system, drawing water from 18 separate canals fed by the surrounding hills. One particularly impressive aqueduct, located at Jirwan, approximately 65 kilometers upstream, required over 2 million stone blocks to build and featured a true arch, making it one of the earliest known examples in the world. Sections of it still stand today. Sennacherib also created vast parks and planted orchards with exotic flora gathered from across his empire. He imported rare animals, bears, lions, ostriches from conquered territories, effectively establishing what amounted to a royal zoo. His vision was for Nineveh to encompass a representation of everything the known world had to offer. He widened the city's streets, enforcing a law that anyone whose new building encroached upon a royal thoroughfare would be impaled above their own front door, thus ensuring the roads remained wide. And then there was the palace. He named it the Palace Without Rival, not as a boast, but as a precise description. The building's main axis extended roughly 500 meters and contained at least 80 rooms. Its entrance was flanked by solid bronze columns resting on the backs of solid bronze lions and bulls, each weighing a monumental 43 metric tons. Inside, nearly 3 kilometers of intricately carved stone reliefs adorned the walls, depicting detailed narrative scenes of military victories, hunts, construction projects, and court ceremonies. These reliefs represent some of the finest artworks produced in the ancient world. At the entrance to the throne room stood the Lamassu winged bulls with the heads of bearded men, standing 4 meters tall. These guardian spirits were designed to evoke precisely what Sennacherib intended every visitor to feel: insignificance. Moreover, some researchers propose an even more extraordinary secret hidden here: the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, described in vivid detail by numerous ancient writers. These gardens have never been definitively found in Babylon itself, despite extensive archaeological excavation. Historian Stephanie Daly has presented a compelling academic case that the Hanging Gardens were, in fact, located here in Nineveh, built by Sennacherib using a sophisticated water-raising mechanism driven by a screw device, the very same mechanism we later attribute to Archimedes, but constructed 3.5 centuries before his birth. If her theory is correct, antiquity's most famous garden lies buried beneath this very mound. It is plausible that ancient writers simply attributed Nineveh's wonders to the more renowned name of Babylon. So, what was life truly like within these magnificent walls? The city spanned approximately 3 square kilometers, roughly equivalent to twice the size of New York City's Central Park. At its zenith, the population reached around 100,000 people, securing its place as the largest city in the world by a considerable margin throughout most of the 7th century BCE. The lower city was a vibrant, dense, and bustling hub of commerce. Nineveh's strategic location at the crossroads of major north-south and east-west trade routes meant merchants from across the known world passed through its gates. On any given street, one might hear Akkadian, Aramaic, Hebrew, Elamite, or Egyptian, making the city genuinely cosmopolitan in the truest sense. Scribes, highly educated men, meticulously documented letters, contracts, records, and administrative decrees using cuneiform on clay tablets. Temples hosted daily rituals to maintain the city's vital relationship with its gods. Taverns, market stalls, and workshops teemed with activity. The city walls themselves were so broad that markets were even held atop them. However, an undeniable darker side, impossible to disentangle from its grandeur, underpinned this magnificent society. The empire was built upon forced labor. A significant portion of the individuals constructing and maintaining Nineveh's monumental structures were deportees, men, women, and families captured from Israel, Babylonia, the Levant, and countless other territories, brought here against their will and compelled to work. The carved reliefs adorning the walls of Sennacherib's own palace depict Judean captives assisting in the arduous task of hauling Lamassu statues across the palace floor, a stark image of the king displaying his trophy labor. Nineveh was a city of extraordinary achievement, yet it was simultaneously built upon extraordinary suffering. Both truths coexist, and the historical record does not permit us to choose between them. In 668 BCE, Sennacherib's grandson ascended the throne. His name was Ashurbanipal, and he stands, by any measure, as one of the most fascinating and troubling figures of the ancient world. He was the last king under whom the Assyrian Empire functioned as a true global power. Under his rule, the empire reached its absolute territorial maximum, extending its dominion into Egypt, which Assyria conquered and briefly held in the 660s BCE. It was the single largest empire the world had ever witnessed, and Ashurbanipal himself was a man of remarkable contradictions. On one hand, his military campaigns were as brutal as anything his predecessors had wrought. He mercilessly crushed a rebellion in Babylonia led by his own brother, Shamash-shum-ukin, who tragically immolated himself in his palace when defeat became inevitable. Ashurbanipal utterly destroyed the Elamite city of Susa, leaving its ruins so devastated that it took generations to recover. His inscriptions graphically describe how he severed the heads of his enemies and stacked them outside city gates, and how prisoners were paraded through the streets on leashes and chains before their execution. Yet, on the other hand, within those very same inscriptions, on those same clay tablets, Ashurbanipal boasted about something no Assyrian king had ever deemed worthy of mention before. He could read. I, Ashurbanipal, learned the wisdom of Nabu, the entire art of writing on clay tablets, he proclaimed. In a world where kings routinely relied on scribes for all written matters, Ashurbanipal was personally literate in both Sumerian and Akkadian. He considered this one of his greatest achievements, and he put that literacy to immediate and profound use. He dispatched scholars and scribes across the entire empire with a singular mission: to find every cuneiform text in existence and bring it to Nineveh. This monumental undertaking collected medical diagnoses, astronomical tables, mathematical calculations, religious hymns and rituals, legal codes, creation myths, flood narratives, and epic poetry. The culmination of this effort was the Library of Ashurbanipal, a collection of over 30,000 clay tablets housed in the North Palace. It represents the first systematically organized library in recorded history, and within it, among those thousands of tablets, were copies of something written down more than 1,000 years before Ashurbanipal was born. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving work of literature in human history. It tells the story of a king who witnesses his closest friend die and embarks on a global quest for eternal life, only to discover it is unattainable. It is a profound narrative about grief, about what it means to be human, and about the inherent limitations even of the most powerful person who ever lived. Buried within the 12th tablet of that epic is a detailed account of a great flood sent by the gods to destroy humanity. An account so strikingly parallel to the story of Noah in the Hebrew Bible that when the British Museum scholar George Smith translated it in 1872 and read it aloud, publicly, it caused a genuine sensation. Religious communities across Europe were deeply shaken. The Prime Minister of Britain was among the audience. That very tablet resides in the British Museum today, preserved because Ashurbanipal recognized its immense value. The Library of Nineveh is the reason we possess it. Ashurbanipal ruled until approximately 627 BCE. He was the last Assyrian king to project truly functional authority across the entire empire. And, upon his departure, everything that had been held together by fear for centuries began to unravel. The fundamental flaw of an empire sustained primarily by fear is its simple requirement: constant, overwhelming force. The moment that force even slightly wavers, the subjugated peoples, who have endured generations of oppression, remember precisely the depth of their hatred. Following Ashurbanipal's death, the Assyrian Empire plunged into a catastrophic succession crisis. His sons vied for the throne, and generals aligned themselves with competing factions. This devastating civil war drained the army, crippled the administrative machinery, and signaled to every subject, nation watching from afar, that the long-awaited moment of reckoning might finally be at hand. In Babylonia, a Chaldean chief named Nabopolassar had been relentlessly fighting Assyrian control since 626 BCE. He seized the city of Babylon and declared himself king, pushing Assyrian forces southward and eastward, city by city, year by year. To the east, in what is now Iran, the Medes, a people the Assyrians had battled, deported, and humiliated for generations, had rebuilt their strength under a formidable king named Cyaxares. He had not forgotten Assyria's atrocities against his people. He had simply been waiting for the opportune moment. In 616 BCE, Nabopolassar led a Babylonian army deep into Assyrian territory. He and Cyaxares forged a formal military alliance, sealed, according to ancient sources, by a marriage between their children. The two most potent adversaries of the empire agreed to unite their forces until Assyria was utterly destroyed. In 614 BCE, the Medes launched their decisive strike. They attacked and obliterated Ashur, the ancient original capital of Assyria, the city from which the empire derived its name and its religious identity. The Babylonian army arrived after the battle had concluded and the looting was complete. Over the smoking ruins of what was once the most sacred city in the Assyrian world, Nabopolassar and Cyaxares formalized their treaty. Nineveh was next. Everyone knew it. In the spring of 612 BCE, the combined Babylonian and Median army arrived outside Nineveh's colossal walls. The defenses were formidable: 12 kilometers of mud, brick, and stone, double walls nearly 25 meters thick in places, 15 massive gates, and defensive towers at regular intervals. The Tigris River itself protected the entire western flank. This was not a city to be conquered in a single week. The siege endured for 3 grueling months. For 90 days, the people of Nineveh were trapped within their own city. The defending army, already weakened by years of civil war and relentless campaigns, faced mounting pressure on food and water supplies. Then, according to ancient sources, an unusually heavy rainy season caused the Tigris to flood, and the surging waters partially collapsed a section of the city wall. The prophet Nahum, writing from a Judean perspective that barely concealed its satisfaction, had foretold, An overflowing flood will make an utter end of its place. He was not far wrong. What ensued was not a swift military victory, but brutal, grinding, house-to-house combat through a city of 100,000 people. The Assyrians fought for their city with every ounce of their remaining strength. We know this in disturbing detail because archaeologists excavating the house gate in the southern wall discovered unburied human remains, skeletons scattered across the gateway passageway, covered in ash and collapsed rubble. These were individuals who attempted to escape and were cut down in their desperate bid for freedom. The dig site at the gate has been described as providing graphic evidence of the chaos of the final battle. The last king of Nineveh, Sin-Sharishkun, perished in the fighting. Different ancient sources offer conflicting details. One account suggests he burned himself alive in the palace rather than face capture, an image echoed in later descriptions of Assyrian defeat. While we cannot definitively confirm this, what is certain is that he did not escape. The city was systematically sacked. Sennacherib's palace without rival was put to the torch. Extensive ash layers found throughout the palace mound during excavations date precisely to 612 BCE. The carved reliefs that once adorned 3 kilometers of corridor walls survive only in their lowest portions. Everything above waist height was either destroyed by fire or plundered. The lamassu at the throne room entrance, those 4-meter-tall winged bulls that once imbued foreign diplomats with the immense weight of Assyrian power, were smashed. Remarkably, the library partially survived, not because anyone protected it, but because the very fire that consumed the palace also baked the clay tablets within, hardening them. Thus, the destruction of Nineveh inadvertently preserved its greatest intellectual legacy. Those who survived the battle were either killed or deported into the surrounding countryside, scattered into small settlements from which no future Assyrian power could ever be organized. The conquerors were methodical. They were not merely defeating an enemy, but ensuring that this enemy could never return. The Hebrew prophet Nahum, whose people had endured over a century of Assyrian domination, encapsulated the sentiment of the entire ancient world in his words regarding Nineveh's fall. There is no healing for your wound. Your injury is fatal. All who hear the news about you clap their hands at your fall. The ancient world did not mourn Nineveh. Within 2 centuries of its catastrophic fall, Nineveh became so thoroughly buried by earth and silence that in 401 BCE, the Greek soldier Xenophon led his army of 10,000 directly past its ruins, recording the site merely as a place called Mespila. The local inhabitants no longer even knew its true identity. It remained forgotten for over 2,000 years, until 1847, when British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard began excavating the mound of Kuyunjik on the edge of Mosul. He broke through into the throne room of Sennacherib's palace, discovering carved reliefs of such breathtaking quality that they stopped him in his tracks. He found the lamassu, cracked and scorched, yet still standing precisely where Sennacherib had placed them 2,500 years earlier. He unearthed thousands of cuneiform tablets. These winged bulls were eventually shipped to London and placed in the British Museum, where they stand today, still vast, still watchful. In 1872, British Museum scholar George Smith translated one of these Nineveh tablets and discovered within it the story of a great flood, an account older than any version found in any religious text he knew. He read it publicly to an audience that included the Prime Minister of Britain, and the room was profoundly moved by his revelation. In 2014, Nineveh tragically suffered a second destruction. The Islamic State seized Mosul and systematically ravaged the ancient city sites, demolishing partially reconstructed gates, tunneling through the mounds to loot artifacts, and attacking what remained in the Mosul Museum. The world watched in real time as militants wielded sledgehammers against a lamassu that had survived 2,000 years. History, it seems, does not always move in a straight line. Yet, the tablets survived. The library that Ashurbanipal built, preserved by the very fire that destroyed his city, continues to be studied. The Epic of Gilgamesh is still being read, the story of a king who yearned for eternal life, preserved within a city that could not endure. Nineveh is gone, but somehow, in the most unexpected way, it is still here. The story of Nineveh is a testament to unchecked power and the inevitable consequences when the rest of the world finally decides to impose limits. It reveals the profound fragility of even the greatest achievements. The largest city in the world, the greatest library in history, the most powerful army on earth, all vanished in just 3 months, buried so completely that the next civilization to walk across its site had no idea it was there. The Assyrians were, by any measure, one of the most brutal empires in history. They proudly proclaimed it in their own inscriptions: mass deportations, pyramids of heads, entire cities wiped out as policy. Yet, they also bequeathed to us the oldest library in history, the oldest work of literature on earth, an engineering system that may have produced one of the 7 wonders of the world, and a written record so detailed that it continues to teach us today. So, here is the question. When Nineveh fell, when the ancient world stood over the burning city and clapped its hands, was that justice, or was something irreplaceable lost forever?